This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM. Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.
Honorable Vice President.
Senator Ramkissoon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for this opportunity to speak on this budget 2018. As we all know, we senators do not have a vote on the money bill, but we do have senators who are in the Ministry of Finance. So I would like to take this opportunity and join with many others in congratulating Ms. Senator West, who's not in the chamber at the moment, on delivering the budget with such finesse. I must say I did enjoy it, and it was her maiden contribution, and she did it quite well, so that's outstanding. Mr. Vice President, I'd like to say that my contribution today, I try to center it around hope. Hope is something that people can find comfort in, they can find peace, they can find success, and they could even find happiness. So I've decided to break my contribution today into the following categories: education, energy sector, tourism versus crime within our sister isles, the Ministry of Finance role as it relates to state enterprises, and how the government can cut expenditure in the social services investment programs by almost $92 million. And Mr. Vice President, as always, I stand here, I always want to bring solutions or even recommendations where the different ministers and ministries can look at it. It's never to condemn or to put a thumb in, but always to try to uplift or highlight issues that I may see as a red flag, and I think more consideration shall be given. So, in my first point, I want to speak about the government expenditure versus its core revenues. In the budget, we saw that the government expenditure is at $53.3 billion, with core revenues remaining the same or predicted to be unchanged at $33 billion. And we saw the 8 measures which Senator Ramkissoon had mentioned yesterday during his contribution, the 8 measures to raise revenue with high taxing of the working class or citizens, and with little or zero measures to reduce the expenditure of $53.8 billion. And it's very unfortunate because sometimes the working class feels that they carry the burden of the country or the progress of the country, because they may work 8-hour jobs, and then persons who are not working have to enjoy benefits through these social services programs. We heard Senator Mahabir speak about, we don't have much to give. So, and I heard another MP said in the other place, we are here to cut and contrive. I agree with those things. But when you look at these programs and these systems and the expenditure of the government, or the estimated expenditure, this is not the message being sent to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So with that, I just want to quote, because before we start the Senate today, Mr. Vice President, we open in the word of prayer. Before we do anything as a country, we always pray. Before, as a people, we always ask God for wisdom, for understanding, and before we do anything. And this scripture came to me, Isaiah 10. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights, and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. Mr. Vice President, there are many programs in our country, or many systems we have countless, and I will be speaking about a few of them, that are here to prevent such. But what is the shortfall? What is the shortcoming? Is it leadership? Is it we don't have the will as a people to progress? I'm going to look at some areas that I think is easy to change and doesn't need money. For example, we just need a minority to start, and the majority will follow. And that's why we have leaders. We have strong leaders within our country to allow such. For example, Mr. Vice President, Senator Rambarat, he's not in the chamber at the moment, but he spoke about public servants and their timeliness. I want to highlight another issue, the professionalism of these public servants who are demanding you give them something extra when you need your land approved or when you need to get your building stamp. What is that? Those are something the ministries need to hold accountable. Why is that I have to give you an extra something to get my tongue and country approval? Another issue that I have seen recently, I have not seen this very much in the past, and maybe because we didn't have such big social media avenues where people comment on everything and anything. But I'm looking at our public representatives eroding public office. And this is something we have to look at, because our ancestors fought very hard for our independence and for us to gain a republic status. And now to have members criticize or condemn members within, I understand they say that politics have a role or a hat of itself, but I do not believe that is what we need as a country. We're an island, 1.4 million people, and they are looking for us for hope. They are looking for us to make a difference. They are asking us, what are you doing differently? We heard from the present administration what they're doing different to the last administration, great. But the public also wants to know, can I trust you? I believe Senator Dukie spoke about public institutions and the trust of the people, and he's speaking about their administration being trustworthy. But you need to walk the walk. So that is an area that can be improved amounts just within ministries, not a different program that will cost our public to improve that area. I look at also the Joint Select Committee had a public hearing with the security and private security firms. And a member from one of these organizations bravely came up to the platform or pulpit or the microphone and said that these private security firms walk a thin line between serving you, as in protecting you, and being a criminal, as in mean coming to rob you the next day. That is how brave our country has reached, where we have members in high portfolios saying this about citizens. Also, Mr. Vice President, we could even look at the lower level, our institutions, and I will talk about education a little later on. But look at teachers asking primary school students to come to extra classes. These children are sitting in school for almost 8 hours, Mr. Vice President, and then they're having 2 hours again to sit down in a class. When I heard my friend telling me they have to drop their child standard 3 for extra classes because the teacher is victimizing their child if they don't send them. So they may not need the class, but because the entire class is going, they have to send them. I found that really hurt me because I felt they're now in primary school, they still have secondary school, and they still have university. Poor children, and then you're frustrating the children now. You're already limiting them. They have to behave. They have to sit in the classroom quietly. They can't make noise. Now you have extra lessons. And then you expect our children and our future to be positive, to not be disgruntled, to not be sad and unhappy. You're robbing the children of their childhood. And teachers are doing this because they want money. They're saying that their salaries, well, nobody feels that they get enough pay. Their salary is not enough. So because of that, they have extra classes. And now victimizing children who don't attend. And that is one issue. Another one that we can look at is, as legislators, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to tell them what speed to drive at. How is that? Humans know that they could never depend on a computer or a machine 100%. But yet, these people automatically knows how Melissa is going to respond when they cut in front of me. I don't understand. That is a culture, a behavior. We are citizens. I don't think you need a program or allocate money now to put up stop signs, money to do traffic lights, also pedestrian crossing. We spent about, I saw 1.6 million in the public sector. When I was driving to Senate today, a man just crossing right in front of my vehicle, the pedestrian crossing, 2 footsteps away. So the government is being asked to spend countless dollars, and the citizens are what? Not using them. And then we're asking them to cut and contrive, and then we're asking the taxpayers, something not adding up. Is it that we need the systems? Okay. Are we enforcing the use of the system? No. I agree with Senator Gopi Spoon on diversification. She spoke at length at the different areas, also the cybercrime legislation. All these things are positive aspects to our country. And I agree with diversification. There's one area that Senator Khan had raised about is our assets, our state assets being aged, and not enough is being done to save them, and how we can appreciate. One thing I want to just say on that point is it is good to diversify because we need to grow, but we should not grow at the extent or the expense of our country's wealth and our power. Sale of state assets to foreign cultures, foreign procedures, behaviors will now encroach on us, and we will be forced to follow suit. And that is something we need to be mindful of. So, Mr. Vice President, I would like to speak about education. In the Social Services Program 2018 booklet, they gave some statistics on the number of students that wrote SCA, and it was 18,180 students. And from that, 2,236 students got below 30%. Now, this is under maths and English. And now, you have 2,236 students scoring below 30%. And now, remember, we fought for every child should pass SE. Well, in my time, it was common entrance. But what you're telling these children, you're giving them a high school. You say, okay, you pass by high school, but you're putting them in a system. They can't read and write properly, but you're giving them to sit down next to a child who made 70%. How is that benefiting anyone? So I read in the book that they're asking 803 students to repeat. Okay, that still leaves 1,433 students. I read also there's a Form 1 penmanship program. Okay, no problem. So if you put 30 children in a class, you need about 48 classes, which is about 16 schools. So we have 16 schools designed for these students who are scoring below 30%. I know Senator Richards always speaks so passionately about education and our systems and is not adaptive to the present day student. And my thing is, I don't support every child passing SEA to just send them into a Form 1 class that they cannot cope. That's why you will have the high rate of bullying, disruptive students, because they cannot do their homework, they don't understand what is being taught, they're just bored, they can't relate, and that is why you're seeing the increase. Now, I was reading only today that Finland actually had a revamp of their education system where they're no longer teaching subjects, but they're teaching programs, like, for example, the World War II. You learn about the geography, the history. Also, how would you relate if you're a waiter, what skills you have. And I support that. For these students who are below 30%, I support learning life skills. I actually can support one of our present initiatives, which is education through sports. And the booklet, the social services program, spoke about the boxing fitness program, which had a positive impact in C-Lots and BTAM. And that's where this initiative was done. And I believe this is something that we can do for these students. Instead of sending them into a school system that they already could not understand for 7 years, I find this pushing them into is just showing that you don't care about these children, and not only they can't adapt. So I would recommend that don't let every child pass SE just to say that you had 100% pass rate, but put them into programs with sports so they can learn teamwork, they can learn life skills, they can have that kind of dedication, they could be part of something, because most of these times the family is very weak. And sports is definitely something that we can push. I know the Ministry of Sports is doing a lot of different works with youths. This is definitely something. Instead of sending them to school where they're not able to keep up with the curriculum. Mr. Vice President, there was also on page 44 a comment about health lifestyle. And in 2017, Trinidad and Tobago health rating deteriorated as a result of the increase in heart-related diseases. So in the report, it referenced suggestions that heart-related deaths were a result of unhealthy lifestyles, poor diet, and lack of exercise. This is in Trinidad and Tobago. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death, accounting for 35% of all deaths annually. It followed by diabetes, accounting for 14%, cancer 13%. Mr. Vice President, there was a reference also to efforts to inculcate healthy eating and nutrition are having higher taxes for foods with higher sugars, fried foods, and unnatural flavoring. There are examples of initiatives in our regions like Barbados, Dominica, Mexico, which have approved taxes on sugar, sweetened beverages. I commend the Minister of Health for removing soft drinks from being sold at the schools, and that's excellent. So we have Bolivia, Chile, Peru, and Ecuador having implemented healthy food laws that regulate food advertising and labeling. I support these initiatives in Trinidad and Tobago. We should definitely have our famous KFC at a higher cost because, yes, I am one who used to eat KFC every single day. And, well, okay, that's his branding. So fried foods every day. And the pizzas and all this cheese. But Mr. Vice President, with a death rate like this, and also it also puts strain on the health sector itself and also on your body. So I would support the increase in taxes on these foods. That's okay. Once the other foods go cheaper, like our sweet potatoes should be cheaper and potatoes and whatever. So, okay, let's go with the energy sector. So Petrotrin has been said to have produced almost 60% of our country's oil and does not pay taxes and royalties to the state, and it owes the government, by extension, the public, billions of dollars in unpaid taxes. And this was said by the Minister of Finance, and he said that Petrotrin only paid $200 million in royalties and a shortfall of $400 million is due, right? And he even went on to say that they're expecting this payment. But my only question is, this state enterprise Petrotrin that they are so talking about is in, also Senator Khan said, is in a $13 billion debt. They owe the state $400 million in royalties taxes, and they made a loss of $821 million. So how they intend to get that money? I would like to know that. And we also know that Petrotrin is state-owned, and the board is appointed. And there's a lot of political influence through the years. So if that doesn't change, what are they asking Petrotrin to do? So I heard Senator Khan speak about Petrotrin, but he didn't speak about how they intend to get this money because they're already in $13 billion debt. And they also have a loss. Right, so, but in another place, he said that Petrotrin is fixable, and I strongly agree that. I believe they have bad practices that has developed over the years, but it can be corrected with will and strong leadership. It can be corrected. Now, the problems in state sectors is not only isolated to Petrotrin, it's faced throughout. And we know this because Trinidad and Tobago has a very brilliant rank rating in the corruption index of 35. Now, 35 sounds like a small number, but we want to have 100. 100 means we are not corrupt. Maybe that's the ideal world, because I've not met any country that has 100, but we would like to be in the 90s and 80s, and we should be happy. But Trinidad and Tobago is 35th rank, where 0 is the most corrupt. But if we look at our history as a country, Mr. Vice President, we realize that we don't really go beyond 30, because from 2001, we have been 53, and then we continue to go down. We were below 50 in 2002, 2004, we were about 42, 2007, 2010, we have been 38. So we have not really been out of the 35 to 40 range. So I'm not sure if every administration is accepting corruption as a norm. And that's why we expect state enterprises to behave as such. I'm not sure if that is what we blame it on, because we have such a poor perception, and it's just not changing over the years. So, and I went and did some more research on this. In January 25th, 2017, in The Guardian, Transparency bosses call for urgent action as Trinidad and Tobago slides down corruption index. And the CEO called for good corporate governance in private companies and state enterprises, adding that this is essentially protected the interests of a company's owners, stakeholders, and was receptive to requests. So companies with poor corporate governance make decisions that adversely affect the interests of the stakeholders, weak corporate governance structures, and don't necessarily provide but they hear us, weak corporate governance structures don't necessarily produce bad decision making, they merely allow it. And this is the words of the CEO of the Transparency Launch Institute. Yes, thank you. So, and he even went on to say management teams abuse their positions and they become very dictatorship-like and greedy. So these things that we can take a strong handle on, that does not cost, but it definitely will cost will. You need to be able to make these difficult decisions. I understand difficult decisions. The reaction sometimes is a little bit worrying because, for example, the taxes increase in the gaming industry. I have read the report laid in Parliament from the Joint Select Committee, and there are many persons in that report that could handle the increase in taxes. So is it that these employers are now threatening the workers to make them strike to say they will have job losses? And maybe this is why the government is always reluctant in making changes. Change is inevitable. It will always impact a particular group. It's not for us to be inhumane about it, but we need to understand it and hear all sides of the story. If certain companies are victimizing their employees for some reason, definitely we need to know why. And just say we will not change it because we don't want to have protesting. If you're protesting for a worthy cause, then we will hear your side. But just saying that you're having an unregulated industry, I do not agree with that. So it's the same thing with state enterprises. And as I said, I will tell you how the Ministry of Finance plays a major role in this division. And it will only change if you really make these strong decisions. You have to make these decisions. As an engineer, it is so difficult to get work done. I spoke one time about the procurement legislation, how long it would take if the roof in the Parliament was leaking. Unfortunately, next week the roof was leaking. And it took what? We saw a bucket there probably 2 weeks before it was fixed. So all these things add up. It was longer, sorry. But anyways, I didn't want to predict a whole, so I wouldn't go any further to predict anything. But even in the social services booklet on page 34, it has a list of problematic factors of doing business. And they actually list Barbados, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. And ranked as #1 in Trinidad and Tobago was poor work ethic in national labor force, 2, corruption, and 3, inefficient government bureaucracy. So, Mr. Vice President, we just can't accept it. And a program is not going to help. You need to make some massive changes, and it can be changed. I want to talk quickly on I'm trying to figure out how much time I have remaining. 30 minutes, okay. 13, okay. Senator Khan spoke about the Permanent Secretary of the Energy Sector, and I want to say something very briefly on that. There is a wide range where the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries is responsible for the management of the oil and gas and mineral sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. And I cannot understand if you are accountable for commercial evaluation, contract management, LNG gas exports, resource management, downstream and retail marketing, energy research and planning, mineral divisions. How can you sit on a state board? I do not believe any permanent secretary in any ministry should sit on a state board because it seems though that you are asked to wear 2 hats, and which hat would you wear today? So I think something needs to be looked at again, because if you look at the roles, the policy management and control of state-owned energy-based companies, all of this falls under the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. So we need to look at that. The ministry spoke about the waste-to-energy plans, and they have spent $0.5 million in a consultancy fee to get this project started as waste-to-energy plant. But let me just remind us about the Water Waste Management Program, which cost us $465 million. And to date, it is not completed because they spent 69% of the total project, which is the Beaton Wastewater Recycling Project, which was done by NGC. So the total project is $1.4 billion. They spent almost $1 billion. And now the comment in the State Enterprise booklet is NGC is currently reassessing the project. We do not want waste energy becoming like the wastewater project. I said I would talk about the tourism and versus crime. Tourism, we spent $56.6 million in initiatives. One of the initiatives was creating business environments conducive to the entrepreneurship. And then another one was making our tourism product attractive. I want to know, how is it $56.6 million to make an attractive project, but our crime rate is 25.1 per 100,000 inhabitants. We are now, what, 97th out of 163 in Global Peace Index. We have dropped 12 spots. How can we sell a product when it is not safe? What is the first thing you do as a tourist? When you are looking up a location, beaches, what do you look for? What's the crime rate? Is it safe? Will I come back home safely? How can you make an attractive project and you can't get the crime rate down? I want to talk about the sea transportation. In this booklet, there was, in 2017, $24.6 million was spent. They said it was procurement of navigational aids, which was about 6.7. Then they also went on to say that they have paving, I guess, infrastructure works at 0.6 million. 6.7 plus 0.6 million is how much? 7.3. But they said they spent 24.6 million. Where's the 17.3 million? Maybe it's somewhere, but the Minister of Transport could tell us about this sea transportation, because we allocate 47 million to this program for the improvement of infrastructure service, but they only spent about 0.6 on infrastructure last year. So I would like to know about that. Also, I didn't really hear much about the multi-purpose vessel for $167 million. You would like to share something about that, Mr. Vice President, about how the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard will be protecting our nation's borders with this multi-service vessel, which is costing us $167 million. There's a quick thing I want to ask. In page 685 of the public sector, that is SAPA, there is a project there, but I think it's a secret project because it says that the audio department of SAPA was upgraded during 2017 with the purchasing of a mixing board for $1 million. The lighting at the facility was also improved in order to meet the demands of the stakeholders in San Fernando and the environs with expenditure of $XXX million. And this is in our budget package. I want to talk about community centers. Mr. Vice President, we spent a total of $19 million on the construction of new community centers and upgrades of existing centers in fiscal 2017. And they're listed, thank you, Senator, in 2017. Now I want to know, in order to rent this community center, you have to rent it at a cost of $3,500 per day. Is this a viable cost for citizens, for community members who want to have a bazaar, or they want to have a program, or they want to have a dance class for their members? Is $3,500 rent an acceptable price for these community centers? I want to talk about agriculture, and I am so saddened that the minister is not here in the chamber, but the Permanent Secretary, Senator Singh, will, Parliamentary Secretary, my humblest apologies, Senator Singh, will, on the point about agriculture. And the statement was made that many young people not going to agriculture. And I asked this Parliament Library to get some statistics on the graduates from the agriculture sector in the University of the West Indies. Because I remember in my time that one of the issues with these graduates is they could not get jobs. Unfortunately, the university only responded with highlights on a report, recent UE first degree experience beyond graduation, and they only had statistics for 2009, 10, 2011, and 2013. And you know what is really surprising about the statistics, and what's probably really saddening too? Low employment rates below 80% is agriculture, food production, agriculture, livestock, and agronomy. Now, I thank God that I did engineering and I was really good at statistics, because this was a high, in the statistics, high employment rates is 90% and over. That went with medical sciences, education, and engineering and humanities. Now, agriculture. If you don't have jobs for people, would they go into the field? Obviously not. They would not. They said that a significant amount of employed graduates reported that they were employed in low-level jobs that require a minimum of secondary-level education, particularly for the graduates in social sciences and agriculture and humanities. So if the minister wants to change something, to change the outlook of young people going into agriculture, look at the graduates right now, the ones who in it cannot find jobs. The ones who graduated with a degree in the sector of agriculture is found wanting there. Because this is the statistics here that is showing. Now, I hope that really and truly I was wanted to get some more recent statistics in this field, which is very saddening that I don't have the statistics. And it's very unfortunate. But to say that the top tier of medium salaries reported have constantly been graduates from the faculty of medical. 5 more minutes. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In medical sciences and 4 in the education and engineering, it really says that this will not be an area that people would want to graduate in, knowing that they have spent 3 years or maybe 4 years of their life studying and they just can't. The statistics is very, very low in the terms of agriculture. And this report is online if the Senator would like to get the information. Mr. Vice President, with the last 5 minutes, I want to talk about this division, which is what is the role of the Ministry of Finance in the state enterprises. And there is an investments division in the Ministry of Finance, which was established in January 1992. And they are responsible for conducting management or performance audits of state enterprise to ensure that they operate on an efficient and effective basis and they discharge their obligations with respect to the public accountability. We have a division for this. The last report given by the Investments Division was in 2011. And they're supposed to ensure consistency between the state enterprise performance and government macroeconomic policy objectives. They have the portfolio of 42 owned companies, 5 major owned companies, and 5 minority companies. Mr. Vice President, when you pull the Auditor General reports and you look at they said that by a memorandum dated the 20th of February 2017, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance was requested to furnish the information and the last audited financial statements of the state enterprises laid in Parliament. Mr. Vice President, all of these state enterprises, like for example, National Commission of Self-Help Limited 2014, the CPEP 2014, Tourism Development Company 2012, FIMCOT 2013. And these are the people to make sure that Petrotron debt is not 13 billion. We have a division. This is my recommendation, that I was hoping that we'd have a division set up to ensure that state enterprises do not have a public debt of 13 billion, do not have a debt to exceed us, to put our country to, and we have a division established in 1992, so imagine my surprise when I saw this. So my recommendation now is to ensure that this division is operationalized, that companies who do not submit their audited financial statements shall be fined, and persons who are in authority will be removed. Yes. That is all. Yes. You have to change it or it will not change. Mr. Vice President, in my few minutes, I wanted to just touch on the duplication measure that Senator West brought forward, that they said they're going to spend some money by the World Bank to conduct a study on waste and duplication. And I find this is an unnecessary study because you look at the Ministry of National Security. We have a $7 billion allocation to them, and we have multiple agencies, intelligence agencies, Special Anti-Crime of Trinidad and Tobago, Defense Force Intelligence, Security Intelligence Agency, Special Branch, SSA, NSCS, Custom Excise, Anti-Capital. All of these are waste. Waste and duplicate. And you have to pay somebody to tell you you have waste? No, 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 no. So, Mr. Vice President, I think I have a 1 minute, and I just wanted to just talk about the marine resources. They are kept in, I hope that these studies are kept in all the ministries and not just one. As you said, silos. We are operating, we're spending $2.8 million here, and then another ministry doing the same thing for next $1 million. Mr. Vice President, we cannot operate. You cannot be telling the taxpayers pay more taxes and we're wasting the money. Yes. No. When I open my salary every month, I am shocked by the amount of taxes I pay, and it is saddening when I cannot drive through the creek without flood. Mr. Vice President, it is very disheartening to have to go through that, and I am not just one of the many who go through this. And to say, okay, the government makes it sound so good. It sounds so good on paper. I read these booklets, and I'm happy to be a Trinbagonian. And then I sit down and I look outside, and this is not what I see. It is sad. I am very, very, very hurt to have to go through this. I tell you, look at how many things I could point out. We have projects here. It budgeted for $6 million, but yet we spent $13 million. And I don't understand how that is possible. Because you look, I talk about this in the state enterprises booklet. And they said it's not part of the consolidated fund. But if you just look at it, you will see that our estimated project cost is not costing. So, Mr. Vice President, I thank you, and thank you all for listening.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. You sure?
Real Prime Minister.
You sure you want to clap? I ain't feel you clap when I finish. I ain't think they will clap when I finish. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute on an act to provide for the service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2018. Mr. Vice President, let me do the normal protocol and go back to some of the contribution made as early as yesterday. Senator Ramkissoon and other members of the independent bench would have spoke about their concerns with the budget deficit over, I expect, the last couple of years. And Senator Ramkissoon in particular was adamant that we should be speaking about balancing the budget, bringing the expenditure down. As a responsible government, one cannot just reduce expenditure in one financial year because the income would have dropped. If a government was to do that and reduce the expenditure by close to $15 billion with one swipe, could you imagine what will happen in a country as ours? So what the government would have done is that over a period of time, we would have set out to reduce the deficit. And in my opinion, that is the course that the government would have taken, and I think it is a very responsible course. Senator Danisa also had that concern, and again, that would have been the explanation for the government taking that. Senator Danisa also raised his concern about the license office, and Senator Danisa, I, as Minister of Works and Transport, I do apologize for that experience you would have had. I did draw it to the attention of the Commissioner of License Office and also raised the concern about the payment, and I have been given the assurance that they are in negotiations with the FCB Bank, and before year's end, you would be able to use your card at the license office.
Will the minister give way?
Sure.
Is that an assurance, Honorable Minister, that before the end of the year, the electronic payment system will be in place at the licensing offices in Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam, Mr. Vice President, I have learned one serious lesson in politics. Don't give assurances when you are not in charge. Okay? I've told the Honorable Senator and this Honorable House that I have just spoken to the Permanent Secretary, who indicated that the process have started with FCB and they're working towards a completion by year's end. Okay. The new Senator, Senator Haynes, and congratulations to all the new senators. Senator Haynes had a different opinion to the independent senators, because whereas the independent senators were saying we should be cutting and we should do everything, Senator Haynes was of the opinion that we cut in too much. All right? Again, as a government, it is never going to be a situation where we can please everybody. But we have a mandate from the population, and in 2020, the population is going to judge us based on our performance. No, I think your judgment is next month. I don't know how much of you would be here after that. Again, Senator Haynes spoke about the government spending money on a highway to Toko and things like that. I want to give you the assurances of the government for both Trinidad and Tobago, and the port in Toko basically would be another link to Tobago. So we are very proud of that project. Senator Saddam Hussein, I am so sorry that the president would have had to stop you there, but I guess as we go along, you will learn that there are certain things we can say now and certain things we'll have to wait until after the joint select, and we will say. And but again, congratulations. You spoke about corruption. I think that was the theme of your presentation. Well, you did speak a lot about corruption. I think between 2010 and 2015, you might have been a student, based on your look. You may not have had the time to pay a lot of attention to what was happening in the country. If you did, you'd realize that the party that gave you the position in the Senate have lost the authority to talk about corruption. However, you're a new member of Parliament, a new member to the party, and the trust falls on you and your team to try to wipe that image of corruption that would have swallowed your party. And I look forward to that, because put partisan aside, we all have to live here. And when money is misappropriated by any party, it falls on us as citizens to pay for that.
I agree. We gotta get
right?
100 million from,
You spoke also about the maxi taxi issue, and I give you the assurance I've met with the Maxi Taxi Association on 2 occasions so far. That is why there's no protest right now. Okay, so having done the protocols, Mr. Vice President, it gives me great pleasure to address this honorable House as I contribute to the critical debate of our national budget and report on some of the activities of the Ministry of Works and Transport over the last 12 months. Mr. Vice President, I must admit it was challenging for me. Let me begin by offering congratulations to the Honorable Colum Imbert, Minister of Finance, and our own Senator Alison West on delivering an outstanding presentation of the budget statement 2018. a well-planned financial guide with the fitting theme, changing the paradigm, putting the economy on a sustainable path. Mr. Vice President, I would also like to congratulate Minister Camille Robinson-Regis and her staff for their input in the budget presentation. Mr. Vice President, the National Strategic Development Plan for Trinidad and Tobago, Vision 2030, states that there are times in the development part of a country when extraordinary challenges demand an equal, compelling response. Mr. Vice President, the 2018 budget presentation in the Honorable House is a compelling response to the challenges faced. Indeed, 2018 budget thoughtfully encompass the reality of our local and global economy and measures these factors with this administration vision to reclaim resources and channel them into areas that will best benefit Trinidad and Tobago. I believe that the overarching intent of this year's presentation seeks to demonstrate to us all that we cannot go on with business as usual. When the PNM administration entered into government, the Honorable Prime Minister made it clear that there would be zero tolerance on corruption. On assuming office in the Ministry of Works and Transport in November 2016, I knew then, and as I know now, that there would be pushbacks. This has shown itself in the many forms and various spurious allegations being leveled at me personally. I take it as a sign that I am doing the job that I was placed here to do. Madam President, on November 1st, 2016, I was honored to assume duty as the Minister of Works and Transport. In the past 11 months, my focus has been and remain unwavering to provide relief to the people who suffered tremendous inconvenience because of inadequate transport due to infrastructural, systemic, or administrative inefficiencies. Mr. Vice President, the Ministry of Works and Transport is a large ministry, and its output affects the quality of life for every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, and even our interactions on the regional and international level. With that in mind, in 2016, on entering the ministry, I met a group of highly committed public officers who were willing to work to move this country forward. I also met a number of challenges of an administrative, financial, and systematic nature. The approach has been to build on increased capacity via a number of new infrastructural projects, improve maintenance of existing stock of infrastructure, using information technology to the delivery of service, increase emphasis on road safety measures, move to an enhanced public transportation system, increase attention to the environment, in particular as it relates to our coastal areas, and the improvement in managing our nation's watercourses. Mr. Vice President, I will now provide this Honorable House with the achievements of the past fiscal year and an insight on the way ahead for 2018. Starting with our major infrastructural projects, Mr. Vice President, a number of new roads announced in previous budget geared to opening up all the quadrants of our countries, providing ease of access to our citizens and the necessary foundation for economic growth. Mr. Vice President, I would like to start with the Solomon Holtroy Highway extension to Point 14. In May 2017, after the OAS fiasco and the many hurdles encountered under the astute diligence of this government, the Solomon Holtroy Highway extension to Point 14 was recommenced. In June 2017, NITCO awarded 3 contracts for 3 packages in July, and the anticipated completion date for that is February 2018. In August 2017, tenders for 4 additional packages were invited and closed on the 8th of September. These packages are being evaluated as we speak. Mr. Vice President, by the end of November, an additional 5 packages are expected to be invited, and the anticipated commencement date should be by March next year. This will see the completion of that stretch of the highway all the way to Point 14. Mr. Vice President, I am happy to report that the approach of the government, from the government for that highway would have been to break the highway up into smaller packages. What that did, it allowed the local contractors to participate for the first time in a major project like that. I can say because of competitive bidding, the prices that we are seeing is significantly less than what happened between 2010 and 2015. Mr. Vice President, I want to use this opportunity to thank Minister, both the Attorney General and the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Stuart Young, for the brilliant job they did in recovering over $1 billion from the former contractor. That money is what we're using now to complete the highway. Now, I'll deal with that one just now. But before I go where the Senator wants to take me, Mr. Vice President, I just want to draw some of the challenges we would have had and what we are facing now with the highway, because we'd like to go a lot faster than we're going. Mr. Vice President, what is happening now? I just want to draw two attentions to two parcels of land acquisition that we're faced with right now. In one case, Mr. Vice President, there's a parcel of land that was valued by a private developer for $7 million. $7 million. The owner of the land then hired his own valuator. NITCO said, okay, that land price went from $7 million to close to $67 million. And somewhere along the line, the person who valued that land for that developer ended up in the chair at the valuation department and approved it at $79 million. Those are some of the stumbling blocks. There's another case of a piece of land where the said valuator would have valued for another person. NITCO objected to the claim. Valuator ended up at the valuation department. Now NITCO is settled with a claim of $92 million. And these are some of the challenges that we face. Well, I can tell you this government is going to have none of that. None of that, and NITCO have been given a mandate that they are to continue with no payments for land on that highway until the Attorney General reviews every single outstanding matter. And that is the stand that this government would have taken on that. So, Mr. Vice President, these are some of the, because every project there are challenges, but this government will deal with every challenge in the only way we know how to deal with it, which is dealing with it in a lawful manner. Mr. Vice President, another major project at the Ministry of Works and Transport is the Valencia to Toco Highway. In March of 2017, the route alignment and conceptual designs were undertaken for the construction of a first-class road from Valencia to Toco. At this time, they are being reviewed, and the best route will be presented to the Infrastructure Committee very shortly. And that highway, that first-class road to Toco will be a reality. But, Mr. Vice President, there have been so much talk about why is the government building a road like that in Toco. Well, the first thing I want to say, the people of Toco are part of Trinidad and Tobago, and it is time that part of the island gets a development. However, having said that, what the government planned for that area is a fast ferry port in Toko. Mr. Vice President, Toko lies a village where you can find craft, tourism projects, a small folk museum, and the Toko Composite School. Good bathing, and it is a popular surfing spot between the months of October and April. However, Mr. Vice President, the fast ferry port in Toko is what will bring Trinidad and Tobago much closer than where it is now. The saving alone with a port in Toko in terms of energy is significant. And what we see happening in Toko is the entire eastern seaboard of Trinidad will be opened up for serious commercial activities. So when this government decides to do a project, we don't just get up in the morning and say, let's go and do this and let's go and do that. Everything has to do with commercial development. Yes, I think Mr. Watson Duke made a case for this sport. So, Mr. Vice President, I'm happy to announce that in July 2017, a consultant was engaged for that port in Toko, and very soon we will have the conceptual designs, the layout designs, and the tender document for that port. Mr. Vice President, another major project, and these are projects that we are working on in 2017.
That's right.
Right? A lot of work have been going on in the Ministry of Works. Mr. Vice President, the construction of the Wallerfield to Manzalina Highway. The total length of this highway is approximately 34 kilometers, to be done in 3 phases. The Komoto to Toko Main Road, the Toko Main Road to Manzalina, and the Komoto Link Road to the Churchill Roosevelt Highway. Mr. Vice President, there have been a lot of talk in the public domain about the award of this contract. And I think NIDCO would have done a fantastic job in explaining the process used. I must say that I was very proud when NIDCO invited Transparency International when there were some comments being made about the award of the contract. Sadly, Transparency International did not accept the invitation. However, what is signified is that NIDCO have nothing to hide. This government has nothing to hide in the way we award contracts. Because we know for a fact that once a contract is awarded, it can stand scrutiny. There was a significant reduction in the price. Again, the government used the process where, and I want to just draw the attention to when I came into office in 2016, this project was one project. The government again decided that we must do all the projects where local contractors will be awarded the opportunity to tender. This contract was a $1.8 billion contract, these phases. There isn't much local contractors who could raise a bond for that amount of money, much less to do a project like that. And I think they got just one local contractor at the time. When we reviewed the process, I think it was 6 local contractors participated. And what was significant, the person who tendered because at an earlier time turned out to be the highest bidder. There was a difference between the first bidder and the highest bidder, in this case, a foreign company, of 200 million TT dollars, just 2 packages. Once we invite the local companies, what we are seeing is a significant reduction in the price, because now they can afford to tender for the packages. And the government is very proud to operate in a way where local contractors can now participate in major contracts. I also want to draw the attention, Mr. Vice President, to the House. There have been some concerns about the location of the highway passing through the protected Aripo Savanna. This project is passing almost 150 meters away from the Aripo Savanna. So it is not interfering with the protected area of the Aripo Savannah. Mr. Vice President, the Churchill-Roosevelt Highway widening. For those of you who had traversed the East-West corridor, you would realize that the Ministry of Works, through the pure unit in-house, have been widening the highway, adding an extra lane all the way up to Arima. This project has been completed, again using 100% local expertise, and it was handled in-house by the pure unit. And this project will continue as we go on. The idea is to have all the highways with 3 lanes in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, the rehabilitation of the Maruga Upgrade Road. The Maruga Road Rehabilitation Project consists of 6 packages and extend from Piti Cafe in the north to Marak Village in Maruga in the south. This project is intended to upgrade and access and give access to the fishing port, another major project that this government have embarked on for the Grand Chemi Maruga area in keeping with Government Vision 2030. This project, Mr. Vice President, have been spoken about for decades. This government is making it a reality. So for the people of Maruga, you have a lot to look forward to over the next 3 years. And again, although this project is being done under the pure unit, it is being done under competitive tendering. That way, the population gets value for money. Mr. Vice President, another project being undertaken now at the Ministry of Works and Transport is the Maracas Beach Facility Improvement Project. Mr. Vice President, the responsibility for the Maracas Beach Facilities Improvement Project was transferred from the Ministry of Tourism to the Ministry of Works and Transport in February of 2017. This project was reviewed by the ministry, and the development work package was done basically in 3 phases. We have the pure unit doing the infrastructure work. We have the vending booth, restroom, and the commercial activities being done as one package. And the third package is the design and construction of a new water treatment plant. Mr. Vice President, due to the weather conditions on that part of the island, early in the rainy season, the project has been delayed by about a month. However, we expect the major infrastructure work to be finished by the end of November, and this project to be completed by the end of January of 2018. And so all the users of that facility, the sacrifice they would have made over the past couple of months is coming to an end very soon. And there again, we will be very proud of our Maracas Beach facility. Mr. Vice President, another project was the construction of the Sea Lots walkover. In 2013, the Ministry of Works and Transport received a petition from the Sea Lots residents for a walkover to be built across the Beetham Highway. This project commenced in 2017 and is expected to be completed in 2018. Mr. Vice President, another major project that the Ministry of Works is working on at this time is the Port of Spain to Chagaramas roadway. In July 2017, a contract was awarded for the consultant by NIDCO for a period of approximately 4 months to prepare the preliminary road alignment drawings for this roadway. Mr. Vice President, it is no secret the challenges that the people in the Western Peninsula would have in trying to get in and out of their homes, especially on weekends, when we have all the activities taking place in that Chagaramas area. Very soon, we will have the conceptual drawings as to what is to take place on that end of the island. Mr. Vice President, the Curep interchange. Yes, yes. Mr. Vice President, this is a project that almost crumbled the last government. This project had ministers in the last government. Well, okay. They had ministers in the last government arguing who was supposed to get this contract, whether it's my person or your person. The project was scrapped the project was scrapped because everybody had their horse in the race, as we say in the local parlance. This government was able to go out for tender for that overpass, a design-build contract, and I'm happy to say, without any fanfare and without anybody having any horse in the race, a contract was awarded for close to $100 million less than the price. And we look forward.
How much you value a kid on that? How much you paying yourself?
Let me tell you, whatever they get, it doesn't matter to me. You see, I'll tell you something. Mr. Vice President, could I just answer her? Just let her know that as a Hindu, there's a saying. When you go, you could ask your leader, Jai bi akila, I bi akila. It means I come with nothing and I will go with nothing. So, yeah. All right? So, Mr. Vice President, let me don't get distracted because I think what we would have accomplished in 1 year, in 5 years, they couldn't do it. Mr. Vice President, I'm looking at Mr. Vice President, I'm looking at the time, and I have a whole pile of papers here to go through projects. You know, there's always. I feel, Mr. Vice President, we had things like the. Let me speed up a little bit, because there are certain things again that I want to get to. Replacements of the Parsley Street and Wharton culverts on the Beetham Highway, those were completed. Mr. Vice President, another major project that is going to start in 2018 is a contract have been awarded for the consultant service for the preparation of design-build tender documents for phase 1 of the Diego Martin Highway West, the Western Main Road interchange, another interchange in the Diego Martin area. The contract for the design-build tender documents have already been awarded, and we expect by February, tenders will be going out for construction of that overpass. Again, no fanfare, nobody with any horse in the race. Mr. Vice President, under our bridge reconstruction program, in 2017, 5 bridges were completed. Additional 12 bridges were approved by the Cabinet, and we expect construction on those 12 bridges to start within the next couple of months. Mr. Vice President, the maintenance of our roadways and our infrastructure is very important to the ministry, and the ministry would have launched in November of last year a program called 623 Mend, where because of the shortage of funding and the amount of paving that has to be done, the ministry had put 10 trucks out on the road just to do road patching. This project has been so successful that in 2018 we're going to add another 10 trucks to have 20 trucks just constantly doing repairs to potholes and so in the road. Mr. Vice President, under the road safety, the traffic management branch was successful in the award of 25 zebra crossings throughout the island and the provision of 40 backup power supplies for traffic signals at intersections. They also commissioned road studs on the highways and on some of the main roads. Madam President, the Traffic Management Branch was also in consultation with the disability organization which is the umbrella organization for Trinidad and Tobago. I'm happy to announce that most of our traffic signals, they will embark on a reduction on the height of the push buttons at these traffic signals and to increase pedestrian crossing in urbanized areas. The Ministry of Works is definitely looking at that community and to ensure that even our pavements will be accessible to them. Mr. Vice President, in addition, Cabinet have already approved the new speed limit. It was debated in the Parliament already. And very soon, we will have an increase in the speed limit to 100 kilometers in most of our highways. However, the ministry is very happy about that, And what we also did is that we purchased 9 new laser speed measuring devices. So for those of you who feel that 100 means 105 or 110, the ministry is taking steps to ensure that 100 means no more than 100. Mr. Vice President, again, I spoke about the license office, and I want to touch on the license office very briefly. We opened the Caroni licensing office in 2017. From all indications, the building was built by the UNC. So I give him credit for building the building. This government was able to open it. However, Mr. Vice President, there was a project that started, a project where we brought in the Canadians, and a sum of money was earmarked for that project. It was $300-odd million. That was supposed to give us 4 or 5 sites completed. Brilliant work by the former government, the UNC. They built the building, but what they did is that they used up most of the money on that one building. When I came in, I said, okay, money is almost finished, but a property was purchased in Arima for another site. Mr. Vice President, so I told him, let's go and at least get that building going. Unfortunately, what I found again at the ministry is a building that was bought for $27 million. However, and there's a guy all over the place, running all over the place, say, protesting about Minister Oaks, one of the former transport ministers. I think it's Minister Devan Maharaj. All over the place calling my name. For what I don't know. I don't know what I do him. Yeah, he's a protest minister, and he likes to write the Integrity Commission. Well, I have a file here going to the Integrity Commission. Let him go. Yeah, I have 5 more minutes. Okay. What I found in that file, Mr. Vice President, is a building for $27 million. A letter on the file stating the government should not buy the building. The building is no good. It has to be demolished. A cabinet note went without including that into it. Subsequent to that, an inspection was made by the Ministry of Works and all the technical team after the building was purchased that confirmed the building needs to be demolished. So we bought a building for $27 million. We can't use it. The building is still there. But what is even more interesting, we did a valuation on the building at the time of purchase. The price on the valuation was $18 million. And what is even more fascinating is that we found on the file where the bank was going to sell the building for $14 million. Right? And what was even more frightening, after they realized that they condemned the building, I'm seeing a note where they're going to build a new building for $109 million. Oh, Lord. So we moved from buying a building for $29 million for $27 million. And we have to condemn. So technically, we bought land alone. UNC logic. And then we decided, look, we're going to build a building for $109 million. Mr. Vice President, that file has gone to the Attorney General office, and we wait to see what is happening. Mr. Vice President, I only have 5 minutes, so I wouldn't... 3, okay. Mr. Vice President, I really want to go into my closing remarks. So I wouldn't want to damage the opposition. No, you don't want to give me more time. Mr. Vice President, I have just outlined some of the major accomplishments and the ongoing projects of the Ministry of Works and Transport. I have done so in my budget presentation. I wish to conclude by reminding all citizens that we have our work cut out for us. The economic times are hard, and we really have to dig deep as we put the economy on a stable path. The paradigm will only change if we operate differently. It cannot be same old, same old. People cannot expect to reap the rewards if they are not prepared to sacrifice and work hard. All our ancestors recognized that they had to struggle in order for their descendants to have a better life. And we all know what's the meaning of that. The gimme attitude must become a relic of the past. This government is not going to turn a blind eye to corruption or sweep dirty deals under the carpet. It is a time of full exposure, and those with dirty hands and fingers in the cookie jar will be caught. Whether they are these perpetrators belong to the PNM, the UNC, or any other political party. There is no hiding, and all will be held to the same standard. This government is changing the paradigm and putting the economy on a sustainable path. Those who want to remain behind and feel that they can get away with sloppy work, low productivity, and wasting time will do so at their own peril. Those who cheat and steal from the nation's purse will feel the full force of the law. Gone are the days of covering up corruption. Mr. Vice President, as I said before, now is the time for full exposure. I thank you.
Senator Ramdeen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice President, and thank you for this opportunity to make my second budget debate contribution. Mr. Vice President, I would like to start off my contribution by congratulating the Leader of the Opposition for her contribution in the other place. And notwithstanding what may be said here, Mr. Vice President, the powerful contribution of the Leader of the Opposition in reply to the Minister of Finance caused the government to pull out the member for St. Anne's West, Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, pull him out to sing the mantra of the PNM in answer to the political leader. Such was the fear in the PNM with respect to the delivery of the Leader of the Opposition. The political acolyte, I call him, the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. But I'll get back to him. I want to congratulate, Mr. Vice President, all of the members of the opposition for their contribution in the other place. And I would like to also, before getting into the meat of my contribution, to thank Senator Sturge, Senator Solomon, and Senator Samuel for their contribution and their public duty that they have done to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I would also like to congratulate Senator Haynes, Senator Hussain, and Senator Obika for their appointments to the Senate and for the brilliant contributions that they have made thus far. They have justified the appointments and the decision of the political leader to have them here in this august chamber. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Vice President, through you, I would like to inform the Minister of Works and Transport and the Minister in the Ministry of National Security that over the last week, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have been suffering because of the flooding that has taken place. And on saying that, I say that with a heavy heart because today, one would have expected that when the population woke up to the news that Dave bails out, the person who was appointed by the Prime Minister and the People's National Movement to look after the people of Trinidad and Tobago in times of disaster has bailed out. One would have expected that a responsible and caring government would have come today and the Minister in the Ministry of National Security would have given the people of this country some kind of assurance that those who are suffering would get some kind of help from the government. The see, out of every disaster comes some good. Out of every single disaster comes some good. Because over the last week, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have seen the difference between an absentee prime minister and a real prime minister. And it is not the first time. Because you know, Mr. Vice President, the great American author Maya Angelou has a saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And the Honorable Prime Minister has shown us over and over who he is. And it is time after 2 years for us to believe him. Can you imagine that over the past week, there are people in this country who do not have water. They don't have food. They are stranded. Their homes have been flooded out. And not a word from the minister in the Ministry of National Security. You know why? Because who wrote the speech didn't put it in. That's why. That is exactly why. So today, I want to congratulate again, with no reservation, the leader of the opposition for going out in every single flooded area, from Suchet Trace, Siparia, Pinal, El Carmen, El Socorro, and to give relief to those people. You know why? I have it written down here. The last speaker, the Minister of Work, said that the people of Toco are also people of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, let me tell you, the people of Woodland are also people of Trinidad and Tobago. The people of El Carmen are also people of Trinidad and Tobago. The people of Caparo are also people of Trinidad and Tobago. But you see, this government has a way. Everything that goes south, it don't belong to Trinidad and Tobago. That's how it is. Everything that's south, that goes south, don't worry about that. Yes, the people of Mafikin, when the Prime Minister decided that he will leave the diplomatic center and go up to Mafikin and Sandy Grande, the Member of Parliament for Sandy Grande couldn't even take the Prime Minister to where the flooding was. That's to tell you the kind of MP they have. She didn't know that the Member for Parliament for Sandy Grande didn't know that Vega de Oropuch is part of Sandy Grande. They are people too of Trinidad and Tobago. So when you want to be a Prime Minister, you must be a Prime Minister of all of Trinidad and all of Tobago. That is what the people between 2010 and 2015 became accustomed to. And that is what they will become accustomed to very soon yet again. Can you imagine that there are people in this country today whose homes are flooded out? They don't have a fridge. They don't have a stove. And you know what the PNM is posting today? That the PNM, not a minister will go into one of those areas. Not one, save and except the Minister for Local Government. Not one of them will go. No, I will tell you where you went. Not one of them will go. But you know what they're concerned about and what the priorities of the People's National Movement is? I'll tell you what it is. Post-budget public meeting, Friday, 27th August, San Fernando City Hall Auditorium, 7:30. Where we are, the road ahead, the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, Mr. Stuart Young, and Mr. Edmund Dillon. Edmund Dillon cannot go into a constituency and provide a bottle of water to somebody who doesn't have water and who's been flooded out. He doesn't know about Suchet Trace. He don't know about El Carmen. He don't know about El Socorro. But what do you know about? Organized meeting. This is the most uncaring and the worst government that this country has ever seen. You cannot do that to the people of this country. You cannot do that. It is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. $50 billion we've come here to debate, and there are over 50,000 people affected by flooding, and the government of the day cannot help one of them. I put on public record today without apology that I congratulate Ian Allen. Ian Allen has single-handedly done more than the entire government put together. Single-handedly. Single-handedly. Three ministers of national security. You appoint a man to the ODPM, and because the Prime Minister says he must go, he resigns now. That is an appointment made by the Prime Minister. He must take responsibility. It is time for people in this country to take responsibility for what they are responsible for. Dave Williams wasn't appointed by the UNC. Stephen Ramrup had the ODPM running like oil. Look at what we've come to today. Look at what we've come to today. I want to go back to the contribution of the member, my good friend, the Minister of Agriculture. The Minister of Agriculture told us yesterday in his contribution that when he passes down to Couva and he sees the circles, he's get upset. You know what I learned from the Minister of Agriculture's contribution? That he travels on the road left to go to Rio Claro and Mayaro. He turns off at Couva, Grand Couva Road. He's take that to reach Mayaro. You know why I know that? I'll tell you why, Mr. Vice President. Because since it was so upsetting for him to hear about the 29 million that was spent at the Couva interchange, if he had gone a little bit more south, as he break the corner by Gasparillo and he look on the right, you know what he'd have seen? He'd have seen 300 million standing up there. 300 million stand, iron and steel,
Iron.
the headquarters for Petrotrin. 300 million. Let them say the UNC spent that. If he had looked a little bit beyond that, you know what he'd have seen? He'd have seen WGTL. 3 billion. Not 300 million. 3 billion. So I have it here. You know what he said? He said 236. He could have gotten 236 kilometers of road with the 109 million he has to pay back. I wanted to check how much road you could get with the 300 million that was spent on the Petrotrin. Because you know why? The PNM has a habit of coming to this parliament and telling us we must understand how we reach here. And I agree. But we didn't reach here from 2010 to 2015. There was a hit. You know that Trinidad existed before that. And the PNM existed before 2010. So when he comes to talk about the 29 million that was spent at Presal in Couva, let him go a little bit south. And as you pass Gasparillo and you're going down, on the left-hand side, you will see the 1 billion that was spent on the Brian Lara Stadium. The 1 billion in overruns. Tell me how a project could move from 200 million to 1.2 billion under the PNM. But that is PNM. That is delivery PNM style. I wonder how much roads could have been paved with the 1 billion that was spent in cost overruns on the Brian Lara Promenade. On the Brian Lara Stadium. 1 billion, 300 million, 3 billion on GTL. When you go back, the Minister of Energy spent about 5 minutes on Petrotrin. And it is absolutely amazing that we sit here and listen that Petrotrin has an 800 million bullet payment to be made in 2019. How did that happen? Under the UNC? Yeah, it happened under Lindsay Gillette. That is how much they know about what happened at Petrotrin. That's why you could say that. And that's why the population of Trinidad must know that in the crosstalk, the Minister of Trade said that the Children's Hospital is just a building. That is what it is for the PNM. It's just a building. But you see, to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the Children's Hospital is a facility where poor people could go and get delivery of health care that they can't get anywhere else. To the PNM is a building, and it will remain a building. But the United National Congress will open it. They bill it, and they will open it. I must say, Madam President, I was a little bit disappointed with the contribution of my friend, the Minister of Agriculture. Because of many of the members on that side, I respect his intelligence. He always has an intelligent contribution to make. And I was a bit disappointed because he went back to the mantra of the political acolyte about this company called NGC. So I want to deal with NGC. I want to deal with what happened at NGC. Because the PNM has said over and over that this, I want to deal with it. I want to deal with it. I want to deal with it because I have the facts. The National Gas Company is one of the jewels of Trinidad and Tobago. It is one. And the PNM has carried this mantra from before 2015 that the United National Congress between 2010 and 2015 took out $16 billion from the NGC. Well, before I get to how much was taken out, Madam President, I don't apologize for the money that was spent between 2010 and 2015 that was taken from the National Gas Company. I want to remind the members on that side that when that money was taken out of the National Gas Corporation, that money was used on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It didn't escape like the other PNM projects. That money was the same money that was used to build a health center in Diego Martin West, in the constituency of the Prime Minister, that the people of Diego Martin were suffering for years. That is the same money that was used by the People's Partnership to build 2 schools in Diego Martin West that wasn't built by the PNM in 39 years. That was the same money that was used to fund the GATE program because the People's Partnership understood the investment. They spoke about, I'm surprised that the Minister of Agriculture would have criticized the fact that the People's Partnership spent money on the children of this country. On the children of this country? Madam President, I'm surprised, to say the least, about this issue about NGC. And I'll tell you why. Let me start off by saying that the myth that the People's Partnership took out $16 billion from the NGC is exactly that. It is a myth. It is propaganda by the PNM and fueled by the PNM. Because we took out $12.7 billion from the NGC in 5 years. But I want them to stay quiet and listen, because in 4 months, the PNM took out $3.6 billion from the NGC. You want to talk? In 4 months, the PNM took out $3.6 billion from the NGC. Right? Let me tell you how they took it out. Let me tell you how they took it out, because they like propaganda. Listen, on the 16th of September 2015, they took out $493 million. On the 29th of October 2015, they got the proceeds of the IPO. That was $1.514 billion. On the 25th of November, they took out $175 million. On the 27th of November, 2 days later, they took out $500 million. On the 11th of December, they took out $501 million. And on the 29th of December 2015, they took out $501 million. $3.684 billion in 4 months. You want to talk about the People's Partnership taking out $12 billion in 5 years. You took out $3.6484 billion in 4 months. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you how the PNM is, Madam President. You know how the PNM is. The minister in the ministry of the office, the minister in the office of the Prime Minister, the minister in the office of the Attorney General will stand in Parliament and will tell this country that $16 billion was taken out. And he didn't understand that the People's Partnership wasn't in power after September 2015. A minister who is holding ministerial portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister, the minister who is holding ministerial portfolio in the office of the Attorney General cannot read a financial statement. That is what you offer us as change? That is what you offer us? That is what you will tell the people of this country? But you see, the PNM know how to run propaganda. I'll tell you why. They are quick to talk about NGC and the money that was taken out of NGC. There's another jewel of Trinidad and Tobago that belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's called TGU. But you wouldn't hear the PNM talk about TGU. You know why? You know why, Madam Vice President? There are 2 issues about TGU. TGU was conceptualized under the late former Prime Minister Patrick Manning. It was completed under the People's Partnership and opened in 2013. TGU is the most, or one of the most efficient electricity generation companies in the Western Hemisphere. When it was completed by Man Forestal, the Germans told the people of Trinidad and Tobago they couldn't run TGU. They needed a foreign firm to run it. Today, TGU is run totally by people that belong, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Today, as we speak, they are quick to talk about NGC and how much money was taken out of NGC. Madam President, let me tell you what this PNM government has done to TGU, a jewel that belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me tell you what they have done, Madam President. In September of 2015, the PNM government took out $222 million from TGU. In December of 2015, they took out $55 million out of TGU. In the same month of December of 2015, the PNM government made TGU take a loan, a bond, for $600 million to pay back the government. $600 million. And in June of 2017, they took $20 million from TGU. In 2 years, the PNM has taken $6.1 billion from TGU. And they want to talk about NGC. The NGC money was the government owned too. That's why we was using it. So don't complain about NGC and then come and sing a story about TGU. NGC belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. TGU belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But the problem with that statement by the Minister of Energy is a very simple one. Yes, it's the government's money. The companies, the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago, it belongs to us, right? So don't be making any backdoor deal. Don't be making any deal to sell it. Because, Madam President, in 2016-2017, the Minister of Finance announced in his budget presentation 2016-2017, and I quote, the sale of 20% of Trinidad Generation Unlimited, TGU, will be sold to institutional investors such as National Insurance Board and the Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation. This measure is expected to generate $600 million. That was in 2016-2017. In the midterm review, 6 months later, that went up. They proposed we propose that a new shareholder will hold up to 40% of the shareholding in the company, with another 10% offered to public and or institutional investors. But the $600 million that was for 20% has now grown to $3 billion for 40%. But you see, the plot thickens with this TGU. Because while the minister in the midterm review was telling the country that the cabinet was going to sell 40% of TGU, on the 25th of May 2017, on the 25th, Madam President, it is very important, the dates, the 25th of May 2017, this cabinet, led by this Prime Minister, made a decision that the Ministry of Finance and the Union Estate Electricity Generation Limited will, with appropriate consultants, manage the sale of Trinidad Generation Unlimited, the plant, to Forestal, 40% of TGU, with another 10% offered to the public and private institutional investors. That was on the 25th of May. Cabinet decided to sell 40% to Forestal. All relevant consultancies be engaged by the Union Estate Generation Company Limited on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, with costs to be on a reimbursable basis. Madam President, I want to ask the question, how is it that the Cabinet, by Cabinet Minute number 922 of May 25th, 2017, could decide to sell 40% of TGU to Ferrostal, the company that built it? In May, the Cabinet decided that. But on the 9th of June, on the 25th of May, Cabinet decided to sell it. On the 9th of June, the Prime Minister was asked, would the Prime Minister say whether government has reached an agreement to divest 40% of Trinidad Generation Unlimited to a private sector investor. More than a week later, after the cabinet decision. And you know what the response of the Prime Minister was, Madam President? The response of the Prime Minister was, after the cabinet already agreed to sell, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance in his capacity as corporation sole is currently exploring the divestment of 40% of TGU, and there is no agreement at this time. The process is the widest process, having indicated in the national budget a public expression that we are interested in receiving from interested parties, and we are prepared to divest. We are considering offers. We are inviting persons who may be interested, international companies that are working in Trinidad and Tobago in the area. We are looking at the broadest spectrum, and the Cabinet will determine, based on the offers, what is the best option for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This is the reason why people don't trust the government and the Prime Minister. Because when questions are asked and the answers are given and the facts are revealed, you realize why you cannot trust this government. That sale of TGU, if it goes through, will be challenged at every single stage. I put the government on notice. This government will not be allowed to sell out the assets of this country like this. Those assets, Madam President, they don't belong to the PNM. They belong to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And when they are lost forever, Madam President. And I say that, Madam President, with a heavy heart. You know why? Because one of the other jewels of Trinidad and Tobago was MHTL. MHTL, that was created by Dr. Kirsten Coombs, was one of the jewels of this country. And you know why this country doesn't have it today? You know why? Because one of the advisors to the government today was the governor of the central bank. And they allowed CL Financial to play with it like a toy. And today, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have lost MHTL. It was one of the greatest energy investments. MHTL, Atlantic LNG, Point Lisas, and TGU. Those were the jewels of our country. And that advisor that you have today is responsible for it.
Is that Ewan Williams?
And they wouldn't release the report. They wouldn't release the report and let the people of this country see what was going on and what the central bank was doing while CL Financial was playing with the people's money that belonged to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, I want to move on to the Ministry of the Attorney General. And I want to refer to the contribution, and I will explain to you, Madam President, why this country finds itself in the position that it finds itself in today. We warned this country in 2015 that if you elect the PNM, you will elect a government that is incompetent and incapable of running this country. And in the past 2 years, we have seen that unfold before the eyes, and that is why the people of this country are suffering today. The Attorney General, Madam President, the Attorney General is constitutionally mandated to be the legal advisor to the Cabinet and to the government of this country. I wouldn't have enough time today to outline all of the missteps that we have had between 2015 and now by the Attorney General. But I want to highlight one in particular. And you know why I highlighted, Madam President? I highlighted because there was a law student picked it up. And I'll tell you why it is embarrassing to this country, why it is embarrassing to the government. When the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine was making his contribution in the other place, one of the things that he pointed out was that it is wrong for the government to bring legislation to the Parliament that requires a special majority and take out the special majority requirement. And it is something that the opposition has complained about. The member for St. Augustine was making a very valid point, Madam President. Madam President, it is inexplicable and unbelievable that in the Attorney General's contribution, to the appropriation bill in the other place, I want to tell you and read out to you, Madam President, exactly what the Attorney General said. Because I want to demonstrate to the people of Trinidad and Tobago the kind of people that hold public office in this government. This is the Attorney General on the 12th of October, 2017. The member for St. Augustine yesterday spoke about the Attorney General being tactical and bringing bad law and saying that 3/5 majority were required on bills. And I asked in crosstalk yesterday to my learned colleague, well, if you have a complaint of that nature, why don't you go to court? And his response was it was too expensive to go to court. And listen to what the Attorney General said, Madam President. I would like to inform the honourable member that in matters of a constitutional nature, where you can go and there is no prescriptive amount, that the maximum exposure in costs that you are facing is 14,000. That is certainly not a far stretch, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I can't stand here and allow an Attorney General to make that kind of statement on the Hansard, tell the people of this country that the Attorney General, Madam President, is responsible for all of the litigation that is brought against the state of Trinidad and Tobago. All. The civil litigation is brought in his name, eo nomine, under the State Liability and Proceedings Act. And you are telling me that an Attorney General will tell the country this, knowing fully well that when you file a constitutional motion or you file a judicial review, that the costs that you are liable for are hundreds of thousands of dollars? That is what you will do? I'll put on the Hansard to correct the Attorney General, because you know what it shows? You have an Attorney General who doesn't know what the law is. That is what it is. And I make no apology for saying that.
Senator Ramdeen, please take your seat. I just want to remind you about the standing orders, about members of Parliament, fellow members, okay? And how you approach what you're saying, okay?
Madam President, the Attorney General said in his contribution that the exposure in costs to someone who brings a judicial review or a constitutional motion is $14,000. That was the Attorney General. The Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago, which is the highest court of the Supreme Court in Trinidad and Tobago, in Civil Appeal number 75 of 2013, a quorum of Mendonça, Jamada, and Barrow Justices of Appeal have said otherwise. So let me read into the Hansard what they have said. In this context, common sense dictates that the stated approach to costs should be so. Indeed, it is eminently rational. Constitutional and judicial review actions are unique, not only in nature, but also because in terms of quantification of costs, it is virtually impossible to apply standardized criteria based on the value of a claim. What is the value of a breach of a fundamental right? What value does one place on striking down legislation as not reasonably justifiable in a democratic society? And this is it, Madam President. Fixed or prescribed costs are simply not apt. The very nature of these kinds of actions, which can include significant public interest litigation, includes challenges to legislation and executive action, and redress for human rights infractions, justly demand case-by-case customized cost assessments. So I've read what the Court of Appeal has said, and I make no apology for saying that what the Attorney General said in his contribution was wrong and was incorrect and does not accord with what the law of Trinidad and Tobago is. But it goes a little further than that, Madam President, and that's why it bothers me. Because I was looking at the parliamentary channel when the Honourable Attorney General was making his contribution. And while it would be forgivable that not everybody will read every judgment and know what the law is, what is unforgivable, Madam President, is that you will quote things that you know are incorrect. And why I say that, Madam President?
Seat, please. You remember what I just told you? So whatever you're presenting, you should know by this stage how to present it, okay?
The Attorney General told the Parliament that the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs budget under this was, I'll tell you what he said, I'll quote it. The appropriation now before us for the two ministries, Attorney General and Legal Affairs, is $263 million. Let me tell you what the documents that were presented to us by the Ministry of Finance, which was approved by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance before it came here in Cabinet, said. The Attorney General said the budget was $263 million. The 2018 estimates show that the budget of the Attorney General was $286 million. That's a mere $23 million more. It mightn't be much for them. It's a lot for us. In 2 years, the Ministry of the Attorney General has spent $341 million actual expenditure in 2017. $302 million, and they come in to spend $286 million. What value have the people of Trinidad and Tobago gotten for over $1 billion outside? Sorry, not $1 billion, 800, over $800 million spent on the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. And you know, they have an obsession with figures, because the Attorney General has a way of, he said, we saw in the last government there was $444 million in legal fees spent on the Attorney General's office. In fact, listen to this. In fact, this is the Hansard, you know. I am able to report today that we have spent $10 million on local attorneys, and we have cleared $38 million to the DPP's office. That's the Attorney General. So since the Attorney General said that, let me quote the figures from the documents that were approved by the Cabinet, led by the Prime Minister, of which the Attorney General is a member, the second highest member that approved these figures. And let me, 10 million on local attorneys, 38 million on the DPP's office. The 2016 figures show, I'm obliged. The 2016 figures show that the Ministry of the Attorney General spent $86 million. $86 million. You tell me Parliament, you spent 10 and 38. You spent $86 million. $50 million in 2016. And you know what is disturbing about it? Is that in the paragraph later on, he tells the country that we as a government have spent 8% of what my predecessor spent. Can you believe this? Can you believe this? This is on the Hansard. This is the respect that you have for the people. Have some more respect for the intelligence of the people of this country. Madam President, before I close, there is one issue I want to deal with. Today on the Express newspaper, it's hard. The child who has won the President Gold Medal in this country last year, who topped the Caribbean in every subject that she wrote, who lives in Ramguli Trace in Cunupia, whose house is flooded out, who went to study at the University of Toronto, not in law or medicine. She went to study forensic science because she understood the need that our country has for those people. Today, Priya Maharaj has to sue the state to pay, you know what? Her tuition, her clothes, her warm clothing allowance, her warm clothing allowance, her book allowance. After $50 billion you spent last year, a child who topped this country has to tell the government that I will sue you to get what she's entitled to, the President Gold Medal winner. Madam President, there is nothing else that needs to be said about this government. Nothing. You see, Madam President, we want to change the paradigm too. We really want to change the paradigm. And you know why we want to change the paradigm, Madam President? We want to change the paradigm, and we will change the paradigm. I'll tell you why. We want to change from a Prime Minister that disrespects our women to one that sees our mothers, grandmothers, daughters, and sisters as the matriarchs of our country. That is what they are. We want to change from a government that promises performance to a government that delivers on its promises. We want to change from from a government of anger, insults, and arrogance to a government that listens, cares, and comforts the people. We want to change from a government that is incompetent, visionless, and leaderless to a government that provides a path so that all Trinidadians and Tobagonians will understand that they have a future in Trinidad and Tobago, and we can take Trinidad and Tobago back to the paradise that we know it to be. And it's very easy to accomplish all of those things, Madam President. All we have to do is put those here, and we will go there, and that is how it will be accomplished. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Chote.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have a few comments to make on the budget presentation, because this is not really my area of expertise, but there are some common sense questions that I have with respect to some of the information provided. I started by having a look at the document which deals with the social sector investment program. And I realized that some of the data in there probably has to be updated, because I heard the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance speak about our ranking on the Global Competitive Index as being 83. But when I looked at the document, I saw that we had actually dropped from 89 down to 94. So if it is that we are now at 83, then we've jumped 13 points. I'm not sure if my maths are correct, but we've jumped quite a bit on the Global Competitive Index. Now, that would be wonderful, but it's not making sense when I look at the other figures. Now, it could be that I simply am not good at statistics and I'm reading this all wrong. That is entirely possible. And if that is so, then I would be grateful for this to be clarified, because anyone reading these documents may form the same erroneous impression as I do. When I looked at some of the things that they take into account, I looked at the Global Gender Index, which basically talks about or deals with the disparity in earning power of men as opposed to women. And I see that in that index, and that is to be found at page 35 of the document to which I referred, I see that we dropped 10 spots in educational attainment. Now, how can we be rising in the Global Competitive Index if we are falling in educational attainment? And more deeply, I think the deeper question is, how do we accomplish a paradigm shift unless we place more emphasis on education? Because we are not automatons. We are people. We are sentient beings. We are thinking people. You want to change people's minds, and the only way, with all due respect, that we can do that is through educating them. So it becomes a little disturbing when I see that we have dropped 10 points on this particular index. Now, the document in question also says or records that there were declines in economic activity in both the energy and non-energy sectors. Well, we are in a recession, so that is hardly surprising. But I think that what the government is trying to say in changing the paradigm is that we have to push to enhance the non-energy, the renewable energy systems. But I think the difficulty we are having is, how do we do that when we know that we have substances that we can extract and sell? And I think there is a sort of pulling and tugging in our policy makers as to which way should we go. Should we let go of the extractive industry base of our economy with which we've become comfortable, or should we push for the renewable energy systems? And I'm not really sure that I was able to discern from these documents how that is going to be done. First, I was not clear whether there is a definite choice. And second of all, I was not seeing a path as to how it could be done. I'm seeing individual projects, like when I read the fine print, I see that tires are in fact being used to make bitumen, and bitumen is being used, I think, by NIDCO to patch holes and so on. So there are individual projects of this kind. But whether there is general oversight of these individual projects in such a way that they may be pushed as an alternative energy form and as a profitable energy form, I am not entirely sure that I am seeing that. I would hate to think that so late in the day that we are still looking at these options as simply projects. We should be way ahead of the game when it comes to these things. I also noted in that document that there is a suggestion that there would be seed funding of $100,000 for small projects. Now, this reminds me a little bit of the project which had existed for people to set up preschools. And I remember grants were being given for young women in particular to set up preschools around the country. And I had young women coming to me at my office not having a clue. It was a wonderful idea. They wanted to get involved in it, but they didn't know what was required to set up a preschool. So even though they were able to get the grant, you really wondered how they were going to manage this tiny business without the necessary training to accomplish what we are hoping that they would have done. That is to say, become small business people. And that, of course, that project went the way of all flesh. Now, I think perhaps what we ought to spend a lot of time focusing on is just my point of view. Doesn't have to be that of the governments. At the end of the day, the government has a duty and the responsibility to provide a budget for good governance. So my comments are simply comments on the documents provided. I think what we need to look at before we talk about, the world of innovation and so on, I'm not downgrading innovation, but I think we must absolutely focus on processes which enhance our efficiencies. And if you look at any government ministry or any state enterprise, the first thing that will come to you when you look at the structure of the organizations, the number of employees, the number of units and the tasks that they are given to do, you would see that many of these ministries and statutory authorities, first of all, they replicate the efforts of units within themselves. So let's take Ministry of National Security and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because they are, for some reason, are always the best example. And you have all these units within these institutions collecting data, recording data, fighting one particular kind of crime here, fighting another kind of crime there, and it seems as though no unit or there is no overarching authority which allows these units to interact with each other and share their information. So it sounds nice. You're fighting crime because you have 20 units and the acronyms get longer and more unusual. But there are 20 units when you could have 10 working effectively or more effectively because they are regulated. You cut down the numbers, so responsibility of the individual takes priority, and it's not lost in a group. It's not lost in the question of who could make a cell phone call to a friend before a raid is carried out. It makes your law enforcement tighter and more efficient. And I'm respectfully thinking that perhaps that is the best example that I can offer in terms of energy, efficiency enhancement. Forensic Science Center. Now, I will talk about these things because I'm a lawyer. So, obviously, they mean a lot to me. Forensic Science Center, well, we had that terrible situation where there were more dead bodies than pathologists, forensic pathologists, because you don't require a simple pathologist to do a postmortem. You need to have a forensic pathologist. It's true that in the world market, there are not that many of them. But you would tell me that after all these years, we can only afford to have one at a time? The man was working beyond his capacity. When someone is placed in a situation like that, you undermine the ability of the person to work at his best. So it's not at all unusual to discover that he decided he'd had enough and he was gone. So where are we left? The Forensic Science Center also analyzes narcotics and firearms. Well, so do they at what we used to call SOT. I forget now what the agency is, but it's at the Police Training College. And if you go to a courtroom and somebody is held with what appears to be narcotics or firearms, before it goes to the Forensic Science Center, it goes to the examiners at Police Training College, and then it goes to the Forensic Science Center. So how is efficiency assisted by that? How is the efficiency in crime detection and the justice system affected by that? The only way it is affected is negatively, because it means now you have to wait for 2 sets of examinations to take place. One which can't be referred to in court because the law is not really open to that. And the other one who will have to look at the outcomes or the examinations after the exhibit has been dealt with by this middleman, as it were. So you are taking longer to have exhibits examined and analyzed. You are duplicating the cost. When you take longer, you slow down the justice system. And that in itself creates a cost. So I think we need to look very carefully at things we can do to enhance our efficiencies. And this takes me to something that I thought about when one of my colleagues was speaking and was suggesting that the Minister of Local Government had a very significant portfolio in the light of all that has been happening with the flooding and so on. And I thought to myself, I am almost certain that if we were to look at the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Local Government, we may, and perhaps the Ministry of Works as well, we may find overlapping of duties when it comes to dealing with natural disasters. I think, and I could not understand in the structure where the ODPM fit in all of this. So we have floods, and people respond. We see a truck with soldiers running off the road in the water. We see ministers walking in the floods trying to assist people. We also see average citizens doing the same thing. But where do we get the sense as citizens of this country that there is an efficient, coordinated response to something which happens practically every year? We get flooding every year. And it's not only those, as one person on social media put it, it's not those stupid people who live on riverbanks. Unfortunately, there are people who are poor and don't have running water, and they build their little shacks on riverbanks and are affected by floods. But those are not the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people in communities all over this country who have suffered from floods. We suffer from floods in Port of Spain. If you work in Port of Spain, you would know that there are days when you can't cross the road. So flooding is an issue for the country as a whole. And if I could just make a suggestion that perhaps maybe personnel from each of these ministries, with oversight from an interministerial committee, including these ministers, could address and use their expertise and their resources to deal with natural disasters such as flooding. It would mean that instead of having an ad hoc response, as sometimes you see, and I totally get the fact that, you know, what is placed in the media is not always an accurate reflection of what takes place. But I am like any other citizen. I will just look at the newspaper and say, well, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And what the newspapers sometimes show is an incompetent approach by the authorities to providing assistance in situations such as these. So it is my respectful, very respectful and humble suggestion that maybe that is something that could be looked at. I also do think that we cannot be talking about the expansion of renewable energy proposals and projects without a department, at least, of the environment. We used to have a Ministry of the Environment, but we no longer do. But it seems as though if we have to deal with environmental issues and to push environmental projects as an income-earning means, then what we need to do is to have it focused in the institutions that govern. So I am just suggesting that. I don't know whether it's a good idea, bad idea, but from my point of view, I think it may be worth looking at. Now, that has an impact on one of the things which the government has said in this appropriation bill that it wants to focus on, which is to say the expansion of the yachting industry. Well, I think that is not going to be easy to accomplish if we cannot show people that when they come into our waters, they're not going to encounter oil spills. And we need to be able to show that if there are such disasters, that we have a quick and efficient method to deal with emergencies like that. And we need to show that the people who are sharing these waters with them are licensed boat pilots. So I think that will increase, as I respectfully suggest, that will increase or enhance our efficiency when it comes to those things. Perhaps in small ways, but who knows, we may benefit in the long term. Which takes me to persons with disabilities, and perhaps this is something that needs to be cleared up. Now, in 2015, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago ratified a convention and created a policy brief and started drafting legislation to address matters pertaining to persons with disabilities. But so I was a little disappointed when I saw at page 43 of this document that we were returning to policy considerations, because it seems to me as though we've spent a lot of time and energy and we've made a commitment by acceding to the convention and saying that we are going to have legislation brought in Parliament. Well, let's just do it. Why are we returning to revise policy when we've gone through that process? And I think we are doing a great disservice to persons with disabilities who are part of our community and national life when we don't focus on matters such as these. Now, sometimes I am accused of being a little paranoid. I suppose that comes with being a criminal lawyer. So when the Honorable Minister of Energy started to talk about Petrotrin and started to say, well, you know, it's sort of worn down, the asset is really not what it was, and that kind of thing, and it has to be restructured, I thought to myself, well, this is like the opening salvo to say, okay, we're going to say we're restructuring, but really what we're going to do is sell. Well, if that's one of the assets that's going to be sold, say so that there wouldn't be a big to-do afterwards about, you said you were going to restructure, what that meant, shutting down the hospital on the premises, you know, improving the plant and equipment, what did that mean? And now you are saying you're going to sell. If you're selling, say so, and say what you're likely to get for it. But certainly, I would think, don't say in front of possible purchasers, what I want to sell really, you know, is run down and is not worth too much. Because that doesn't sound like a good sale for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But it may be that the government doesn't intend to sell. It may be that I'm just being paranoid. It seems, though, that if Petrotrin is refining and Guyana is extracting, and we are the closest physically to Guyana, their relations with Venezuela not being that great, then certainly perhaps we ought to look at holding on. But I am not somebody with any deep knowledge of the oil industry. As I say, I am just speaking as an onlooker. And these are just some common sense questions which arise. I'm sure they could be answered and my fears put to rest. But certainly I think that if I'm thinking these things, maybe there are others who are also equally concerned. I think it is no secret that valuations are being conducted at ETEC. So it seems to me as though it's possible that that may be another asset that's going to be sold off. I don't know. But certainly the people who are there and who are operating their businesses there ought to have an idea if there is such a plan and if that plan is going to affect the businesses that they run and they rely on for a living. Again, I could be completely wrong. I'm just asking. Now, I know yesterday evening, I must apologize to Senator Henry, because perhaps it was because it was late in the day and so on, but it seems as though he got quite a bit of pounding in this House. But he actually made a very novel point, which nobody had picked up on, and that is to say, in the context of foreign policy and who is going to be our controller, if I have to put it like that, in the next few years is something that we have to take into account. And he didn't put it quite so specifically, but in reference to what had been happening in China, and in reference to the fact that we have managed to keep excellent relations with China and with the US and with the United Kingdom, we are certainly going to have to ideologically come to a position. If hostilities increase, who knows, I can't see into the future, but if hostilities increase amongst the big guys, what are we going to do? The first thing we need to know is we need to be able to feed ourselves. These are practical matters that we need to address and put in place, because that is a disaster like any other disaster that we as a country would have to deal with. So ideologically, we would need to know where we stand, or if we are able to continue to straddle both sides. But in any event, we need to be able to sort of batten down the hatches and say, listen, we have put things in place so our people will be fed, clothed, housed. And I think that was, I'm grateful to him for his allusion, because it is something that I think we talk about kind of jokingly, but I think it is a very real possibility in the world in which we live. Sea Bridge. Now, I'm not going to say too much of this, but I did see that the port here is going to be dredged. And I think it's long overdue. I believe it had not been done for something like 30 years. So it means that larger vessels can dock without disturbing the Hyatt. Now, the largest amount, I believe, in this budget is once again going to the Ministry of National Security. And I think I repeat myself when I said it last year, that this is making no sense, because the Ministry of National Security over the years have got everything that they have asked for. And then I hear during the course of the year that one of the biggest bills that they have to face is feeding prisoners. So I will share with you an experience that I had just 2 weeks ago. I went to the Port of Spain prison, which incidentally should be shut down and should have been shut down years ago. And I sat there waiting to be taken inside to see the client I'd gone to see. The men who are being released on that day were brought out to the front to sit and wait by the gate. And I saw a Latino-looking man sort of half carrying an older man to have him sit down on one of the chairs. So after observing for a while and noticing that the families of the other men had happily come and collected them and had gone off, and this old man was still sitting there, I started to look at him more closely and realized that he couldn't use his hands, and he couldn't use his feet. He couldn't walk, and he couldn't hold. So I started speaking with him to discover that he had been imprisoned for 6 months. He claimed it was a setup. He was set up with weed because he used bad language to the police. I don't know. Anyway, he was sent to jail for 6 months. 2 weeks before his release, because of malnutrition, the man lost the use of his hands and his legs. So I said, well, sir, what did they tell you? He was taken to the infirmary. He was told it was because of malnutrition. And he was told he needed vitamins. He is a citizen of this country, just as we are. And God forbid that any of us here should have to enter into a prison for 6 months and leave without the use of your hands and your legs because of malnutrition. So where is all this money being spent? Or is it that people working within the prisons are doing their groceries at work? There seems to be no proper auditing or no controls over supplies and products being given to agencies like that. And if we have to enhance efficiencies, that's one bullet that you have to bite. Now, I find it grossly unfair that we should take for granted that this is a high cost and we have to deal with it. And you know what? It's only prisoners' fault. They're eating too much inside there, you see. This is how heartless and uninformed some of us have become in this country. Instead, Honorable Minister, I ask you to consider putting proper financial controls and supervisory systems in agencies like these. And I am sure that efficiencies will improve. Now, I'm not quite sure how much more time I have, but there are two issues that I wish to address before I close. One is the Forex issue. And I remember earlier in the year, the Honorable Minister of Finance had been asked whether he was aware of an underground economy in this country. And he said no, he was not aware. Well, you know, fabric stores in Port of Spain have signs up offering to buy foreign currency. And it's not only in Port of Spain. I would imagine if you walk in any sort of town center or city center in this country, you would find that out. So it means that the underground economy is working. And there is no way that law enforcement can now go and pick and choose and say, okay, we're grabbing this one and we're leaving that one. It is a problem that is real, and how it is to be addressed, I really cannot say because that's not my area of expertise. I do know, unfortunately, when you have an underground economy, because it deals mainly in cash, it finds itself for use in other things which undermine the integrity of your ability to govern. It finds itself being used to bribe public officers. It finds itself being used as payoffs in the narcotics and the arms trade and the trade in human beings, because cash is hard to trace. So I think we need to address that. And when we talk about wanting to make sure that we focus on local products, then why is it this huge amount of foreign currency is being given to chains of businesses which provide foreign products? It doesn't seem to be consistent. It seems as though we are trying to walk two ways at the same time. So these are just concerns that I have with respect to this. I also discovered, to my shock and surprise, that...
The Chote, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. To my shock and surprise, that there are certain banks whose clerks sell the foreign currency in the car park. Surely we could deal with issues like that, create sanctions, make sure the banks do the right thing. They are responsible. They have cameras all over. They must know if an employee walks out and goes outside to sell foreign currency, which should be sold over the counter in the bank. Now, with respect to the gambling industry, I realize that what the government intends to do is to legalize gambling. That's an intention. And I have a little concern about that because I know it's part of the tourism thrust, but I think what we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of tourists do we really want to attract here? Addiction to gambling is worse than addiction to cocaine. As an attorney, I've dealt with many people who have gone under, literally, lost their families, lost everything. Professional people, clerks, taxi drivers, they've lost everything because of this. And we have to make a moral decision. How far do we want to push this? And I'm respectfully asking that perhaps this should be reconsidered, whether gambling should be legal at all. I know the problem arises with the roulette wheels and so on, but that's connected to the underground economy because they bring in the roulette wheels and they take them out together with the money that they make. So if laws are enforced with respect to those things, then we ought not to have a problem. So these are my few comments, Madam President. I hope that some of them may be considered and hopefully taken on board with respect to the financial future of this country. Thank you.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. How good it is to be back in the Senate, Madam President, and to see a warm smile from my friend, Senator Gerald Ramdeen, who I had the pleasure of listening to whilst I was juggling a meeting at the AG's office, having just come from San Fernando. So provocative was his contribution, and so good his skills of advocacy that I was compelled to come and offer a few words of caution, lest one be taken away by the strength and power of his properly persuasive arguments at times. Now, Senator Ramdeen is no slouch to a good argument. He's a good debater indeed. Before I do that, I'd wish to congratulate Senator Haynes and Senator Hussain on their maiden contributions. I also had the pleasure of listening to bits of those contributions, and as two young senators, I welcome them to the work of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. They gave a good outing, certainly, on their maiden contributions. Madam President, permit me to start by saying that this budget, in my view, has provided a soft landing for Trinidad and Tobago. This budget, produced by the government of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, has taken into account issues which have laid without address for a very long time. The issue of spending on subsidies below the line support versus above the line support in the fuel arena, in healthcare services, in education, that's been a debate in our economy for quite some time. Our foreign exchange position, as Senator Chote has just raised it, is indeed a very real situation for us right now, has been certainly for the last 4 years. The situation of accounts and whether they have been produced, audited accounts, Auditor General's reports at the THA, as Senator Ramkissoon referred to them yesterday, have been issues dealt with, the pace of the criminal justice reform, the condition of prisoners, and what we have to support by way of contribution to the upkeep of our criminal justice system, as reflected upon by Senator Chote, all real. But I'm very much reminded of the very powerful Jamaican Prime Minister who said it takes cash to care. And I want to put onto the record in a very succinct way a few of the issues that we are wrestling with as a country. No doubt already raised by some of my colleagues, but I want to be very sharp in this. When we look to the taxes on income and profits, and we see where we are as a country, we have gone from a figure of 25 billion in taxation from oil and gas companies without royalties in 2008. We are this year down to $472 million. Let me repeat that. 2008, and I'll come to the royalties in a second. 2008, 25 billion. This year, 472 million. That is from the massive, important oil and gas economy upon which we are built. Trinidad and Tobago has for years sat on its laurels and said, we have oil, we have gas, we are earning money. This year we suffered close to 93% reduction in revenue. And Madam Speaker, Madam President, I say that on the back of the percentages. Oil and gas revenue as a share of total revenue. In 2011, our oil and gas revenue, oil revenue in particular, was 33.7% of our total revenue. This year, it is 1.2%. 2015 was 18.4%. 2016 was 2.3%. So in answer to Senator Obika, it was declining. But it has now reached to 1.2%. I'll tell you why I've reflected upon these figures. Personnel expenditure up 2010, 6.7 billion. 2016, the last year figures, 9.6 billion. I've reflected upon these figures, Madam President, because I heard Senator Ramdeen say a little while ago, we make no apology for spending the $16 billion taken by way of dividends drawn out of the NGC because we spent it. Sorry, he said 12, the figure is actually 16. Right. $16 billion is the correct figure. Senator Ramdeen, as I heard him, and now corrected, is $12 billion. But the point is, the statement was made coming from the opposition bench that we, quote unquote, make no apology for spending that money because we spent it on the people. That was in essence the statement. Madam Speaker, there was also a further statement on dividends. And the statement on dividends, as I heard it, and I'm open to correction if anyone opposite wishes me to have a seat so that they can clarify, certainly, I heard that 2.1 billion and 1.6 billion was taken from TGU and UEESL. And I want to correct both of these statements now, and I'll start with the latter. In dealing with the dividend position, the fact is the figures are not 2.1 billion and 1.6 billion. In fact, the combined figure for 2016 and 2017 is 500 million TT dollars. That is the fact. It was 330 million in 2016, and it was 170 million in 2017, which was an interim dividend. 500 million. Further, 500 million US dollars was in fact received, but was not under the categorization of dividends. $500 million was received from these companies by way of the debt repayment by TGU to the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It was debt repayment, similar to the CLICO bailout. It is irresponsible it is an indictment to confuse the categorization of dividends versus debt repayment. But it came so smoothly across under the banner. And I said that, Madam President, because I heard the Honourable Member, Senator Ramdeen, reflect upon Minister Young's contribution in the House. And Minister Young's contribution in the House, the Honourable Member, reflected upon it as how could the member who is the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister and Minister in the Office of the Attorney General read a balance sheet or a financial statement wrong. If that logic is to prevail, if the indictment and condemnation is to prevail, then I ask the question now, how does a seasoned, good advocate, good debater stand up and tell this Honourable House that $2.1 billion and $1.6 billion was taken by way of dividends, when that is in fact not the truth? You see, it is important that we get the arguments right.
Yes, continue, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll come to the first limb. The first limb that Senator Ramdeen reflected upon was making no apology for the expense, as he put it, of the UNC government of $12 billion, which in fact the documents of Trinidad and Tobago can demonstrate is in fact $16 billion. So there's a variance between the two positions. The books of Trinidad and Tobago will speak to that. But Madam Speaker, it's not really that you're spending the money, it's how you spend the money. And when one reflects that that NGC money was spent on a Beetham wastewater plant to the tune of $1 billion on a plant that now stands without usage, where the government is finding it difficult to put it to use, I ask the question, how does one accept the condemnation leveled in respect of the Brian Lara Stadium, leveled in respect of the World GTL plant, which, by the way, is well on its way to utilization now, the same way the Brian Lara Stadium was put into use by actually not leaving it as a white elephant, but giving the people of Trinidad and Tobago at least the venue to use, notwithstanding the expenditure. But I can't say the same for the Beetham wastewater plant. $1 billion to SIS, as we know, in part of the construction aspects. $1 billion spent on a plant that we can't use. Madam Speaker, we went to court. We went and we dealt with the matter. We froze $180 million of equipment and assets by SIS, who, once referred to liberally and generously by the UNC as MAMU, is now in Panama, not to be found, fitting within the description of an absconding debtor, somebody who is being looked for and searched for. But I can tell you that that $1 billion spent at the Beetham wastewater plant, for which the UNC makes no apology, for the spending of $12 billion, as they put it, 16, as we say, from the NGC, that is certainly not something to be proud of. Madam Speaker, it gets better. Madam President, look at the issue of the TNTech. We just shut down the power gen station. The UNC agreed that the power gen station at Wrightson Road should be shut down. No negotiation of how that is to be dismantled. The shareholder who has been paid by way of dividends and profits over the years walks away clean, saddles Trinidad and Tobago with the bill, exonerated from liability, clean. We have a problem with that. Look at the EMBD. I'm not going to go into the litigation. $400 million being challenged in court right now. I'll say no more. Look at the NGC. Recreation ground, again another SIS project. People drive down the highway. We were talking about driving past the World GTL plant. People drive down the highway and wonder what on God's earth from space even is that structure as you're headed down the highway or up the highway by the Couva interchange. What use is that put forward for? Madam Speaker, what about E-Beam? Another matter in court. $34 million. What steps were taken then after life sport? 3 years, 4 years, not a step taken. coming from the 12 billion as they put it, 16 as we put it? What about life sport itself? $500 million spent with murder, with mayhem, with antagonism to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Money going to Rajai Ali. Again, a matter in court, I will not go down into there. Madam Speaker, then there's Eden Gardens. Valued for $175 million. Yes, ma'am.
Please, yeah. You know how we deal with these
Sure.
matters. A reference, you can just make the reference, but I do not want you going into the meat of the matter.
Madam
okay?
Speaker, I'll repeat my words. What about Eden Gardens, $175 million? 5 words is not going into the matter, but it's sensitive for my colleagues opposite because they know what is involved. So, Madam Speaker, Madam President, I'm talking to the contribution by my learned colleague. Very good contribution. Sounds persuasive. Let's start picking it apart. It's full of holes. You see, Madam Speaker, we get down to another representation by my learned colleague, Senator Ramdeen. The Attorney General came and said that they spent $50 million when the appropriation says $75 million. True. The appropriation is $75 million. But not true to say that we really spent $75 million by way of implication. We only spent $50,781,736. That is what we spent. Because when you break the country by busing the bank, and I'm putting it in simple terms, as the UNC did, the notional money at $75 million for legal fees could not be spent because the $25 million to get to 75 from 50 just didn't exist. And it is a fact that the Attorney General's contribution in the other house was that we spent $50 million. And that distribution is $38,123,678.73, or 78.44% for the office of the DPP. $10,476,039.03, 26% of the $50 million for the domestic fees, of which we also paid inherited fees from the last government, Madam President. So the contribution was true, not as put by my learned colleague, Senator Ramdeen. And that's why one must not go necessarily with form or substance. Madam Speaker, Senator Ramdeen referred to a law student having to point out something to him about costs. The Nizam Mohammed judgment does speak to costs being treated as of 2013 in a particular way, but there's a reason why we don't quote from one house to the other. Because the debate in that house, and as the member for St. Augustine and I were in exchange, we were talking about the erstwhile position, and I referred to the crosstalk when the figure was in fact $15,000 on a prescribed cost basis, that there was the budgeted cost arrangement and the assessed cost arrangement. But there's a danger in lifting from one house to the other. And then to put it down, this is the Attorney General's statement. He should be so-and-so, and he should be so-and-so. It's the same way we heard the contributions from the leader of the opposition in another debate, going on and on about how the Attorney General was wrong in a debate in supporting legislation which the entire Senate, including the UNC bench, supported. And the leader then stood up as the member for St. Augustine with a case which had been overturned years in advance, a first instance case. See, Madam Speaker, there's a reason why we don't cross the two houses. That's why I've come here to answer what I heard. I was astonished to hear what I was hearing. And it leads people in this country to the wrong conclusions. I want to address the point as to why we are now at 1.3%, Madam President. Why are we down from $25 billion to $472 million? Do you know why, Madam President? Because by way of attraction of foreign direct investment into the upstream industry, the last government made a good decision to give incentives But then they forgot to put the lid on the equation. And they forgot, whoops, to put a cap on the write-off of profits by way of carry-forward losses.
Economic treason.
This is the ABCs of economics. Yes, it's a good investment, but what am I getting for it? Okay, as we heard the past Minister of Energy, Kevin Ramdeen, step out and say, oh, it's due to expire in 2 months' time. They're talking nonsense. Not true. The figures demonstrated by BP to us, to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, is that revenue from oil and gas does not change from the current figures that I've just described until the year 2025. Because the UNC built a house with no walls to protect the country and gifted away the commercial sensibilities of our country. And that's why it is important as to how the 16 or 12 billion dollars, whichever version you accept, from the NGC was spent. It's as easy to get it wrong as my learned colleague Senator Ramkissoon did when he asked the question, how can the THA be borrowing money and have independent credit ratings when they haven't produced their accounts? They have. They're all up to date. They are all up to date. They've been submitted to the Auditor General. It's been the subject of accounts and statements to the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and we have said it in the Parliament. Now, you see, Madam Speaker, whilst my friends on the opposition bench get a little bit jumpy, I'm making the point that unless we drill down to the positional facts, the statement in relation to the THA and the clarification that I've just rendered allows for the THA to fit into the context of that which was promised by the UNC. You remember, Madam President? When Tobago elections was hot and sweaty and pumpkin patch and peas was the talk, Tobago bill came to Parliament. I remember Mr. Jack coming to this Parliament in a bright yellow shirt, smiling, grinning. Tobago autonomy was hot on the table. Terence Baines from Tobago was in the Senate. Chrislyn Moore from Tobago was in the Senate. Tobago was all and encompassing in the focus and gaze of the UNC. But right after the 12-0 victory, forget with Tobago. You see, a bill is coming to this Parliament to deal with the autonomy of Tobago. And it is important that Trinidad and Tobago continue along the aspirations of both of our ends of the equation.
Just hold on. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. And what you're doing there, that's not parliamentary. All right? Have a seat, please. All right? I just want to caution you. You can leave the Parliament, but do it in a quiet manner, please. Continue, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I heard my colleague, Senator Chote, make some significant contribution and reflection upon the state of our prison system. And I'd like to say, I agree wholeheartedly with the position that we need to have reform in the prison system. I'm very pleased to say that the government of Canada, together with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, has made significant advancement in relation to the prison condition and reform. In fact, the architectural repurposing, the case management structures, the rationalization of resources, the completion of the video conferencing facility at the remand yard, the installation of toilets for the first time in the remand yard, the installation of security systems. These are projects which are far advanced, having been left in abysmal decay for the last umpteen years, Madam President. And Madam President, that's to be looked forward to in terms of a delivery by the evidence of what we've done. What have we done? We have, in fact, caused the build-out of the Child Rehabilitation Center end of the prison system, replacing the need for the St. Michael's Home. We, in fact, built out 36 dormitories there, arranged the structures for the whopping sum of $1 million TT. We were able to build all of those in the couple of months that it took, replacing an unconstitutional position brought to reality by none other than one Anand Ramlogan, Attorney General for the United National Congress, whose government proclaimed the operationalization of the child rehabilitation centers effectively. And then Mr. Ramlogan went to court, matter is now finished, and sued the government, of which he was a part, for not having child rehabilitation centers. And the bill to house one person only has come in at $1.5 million. You see, Madam President, how do you take the contributions of the UNC seriously when you hear the reflective context argument that we're having now? Madam President, Senator Chote made reference to the laws that we ought to have in the treatment of our disabled and differently abled if they're put properly. And I'm very pleased to say that the Attorney General's office is in tight coordination with the United Nations to continue and complete the draft legislation to be brought to Parliament. But that is being worked out and walked through at the same time that we operationalize the local government reform, Madam President. Because what's the sense of having laws on the books if you don't have them in operation? Madam President, the reference made up to the gaming sector. I wish to put this, as I hope to conclude at the 4:30 marker. Madam President, we in the government firmly believe that it is important to legislate for the gaming sector. It is a multi-billion-dollar sector, and as it is currently constructed, it is unregulated and dangerous. We require the support of the opposition because it's 3/5 majority legislation. And for that purpose, Trinidad and Tobago will wait to see what the outcome of the Joint Select Committee work is. But Madam President, I wish to urge the members' clubs in particular to have their operators and their owners come to the forefront. And don't hide behind their employees. Because I can tell you, as I declare openly, I have worked for many a person in the gaming sector whilst in private practice. It is a massively profitable enterprise. And they have more than enough money to pay their workers, and they should stop terrorizing them, Madam President. Madam President, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute.